Joining me is Renee Novakoff. Renee is a former Deputy Director of Intelligence for Sensitive Activities and Special Programs at the Office of the Secretary of Defense, which I have to say, Renee, is probably one of the coolest titles I have ever heard.
It's
Welcome.
also very long.
Very long and very cool. Sensitive activities always gets people's attention. You also served for over 40 years in the Department of Defense and several of the intelligence agencies, including NSA, CIA, ODNI, and DIA. Now, your last assignment, though, in the Office of the Secretary of Defense was really focused on providing oversight and guidance for the Defense Department's special programs and sensitive activities, including human intelligence, information operations, and counter supply. Can you explain a little bit about, with that title, what your day-to-day job looks like?
The day-to-day job was a lot of policy writing, guidance, meeting with individuals from other organizations from the intelligence community. Meetings with it was part of our job also then to communicate to the White House and to Congress about events that were going on and report how we were doing. Was the intelligence community following the guidance and policies? If not, reporting out what was happening.
And I would imagine when you're dealing with some of the most sensitive operations, that there's a lot of sensitivities around who you're bringing into those conversations. And I'd love to talk about something that seems like you have great experience with, but right up your alley, given what's going on with today's activity in the region, and that is Plan Colombia. Now, for those who are older like me, we remember that it was right around 1999, I think maybe 2000, that Plan Colombia was launched. It was really a joint effort between the United States and Colombia to combat drug trafficking. It didn't go so great, but there was a lot learned from that. Can you talk to us a little bit, Renee, about your involvement in Plan Colombia and then how you see some of the lessons learned from that? And then I'd love to dig into what we're seeing in the headlines every day right now.
Absolutely. So I spent 15 years at Southern Command. I was their first senior executive analyst there. And I spent a lot of time working with the regional actors and helping to train them and in terms of analysis and helping to give them the best lessons learned that we had in the United States about working together. And that's one of the things that was one of the successes that we got out of Plan Colombia. We learned at Southern Command how to work across the government, and that's really what you need to do. And getting that message, it took a long time to get that message to the Colombians, and we were starting to also get that message to the Central American countries. When we started moving our focus away, we had success with the FARC, or the Colombians did, with a lot of our support. And we started moving away and started focusing on China and the big adversaries and Russia. So once we did that, there was a lot less emphasis on working with those other nations in terms of the pressure on them.
No, there were a lot of people who did criticize Plan Colombia, saying that instead of really cracking down on the production of cocaine, it just forced drug makers to disperse the labs where they were making cocaine, and that it kind of just shifted supply routes because the drug traffickers were so highly adaptable. And I know that you've reached out for a couple of the pieces that we've interviewed you for the Cipher Brief's open source report. And you've said that today's drug cartels are highly adaptable as well. I mean, so this is something you see continuing. So I'm wondering, when you see what's happening in the region now with the deployment of U.S. military support, with the blowing up of this drug ship that we just saw with, I think it's like 11 people killed now. What's top of mind for you? What is coming back to you from those Plan Colombia years that you're already determining whether, what it's going to take for this operation, whatever it may encompass, to be successful?
There's a couple of things. One is I'm wondering if the administration has the staying power, because that's one of the key things. Plan Colombia lasted a very long time. So you need the staying power. I'm starting to see in the press It looks like we're now starting to reach out a little bit to the other regional countries. We probably should have done that at the beginning and gotten everybody at least on board, at least those that would come on board with us, as well as international players, the Brits, the Dutch, the French. They were all players in the region when we were doing Plan Colombia, and they were all supportive. Going it alone is unlikely to be successful, and then the whole issue that you talked about, these cartels are so adaptable and they have so much money. It's unfathomable for the average American how much money they have. I think one figure I saw said, and we don't know for sure, but $45 billion a year in not in revenue but in profit.
Yeah.
These cartels are making. So they can weather this if we're just there for a short period of time, or and go underground, or they can use some of their other routes. Not all of the drugs are coming this way. A lot of the drugs are also going to Europe and the Middle East. And while back probably in Plan Colombia Day, they didn't do it as often because it was more expensive. They've got the money now to be able to use those routes.
Let's just kind of backtrack for 1 second here. And I want to remind folks of bring them up to speed on what's happening right now. It was just recently that the US military deployed forces to the Caribbean, including several P-8 spy planes, 3 Arkley Burke class destroyers, which are typical launch platforms for Tomahawk cruise missiles. I think it's interesting to note. The Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group and the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, including 3 amphibious assault ships and 4,500 Marines and soldiers. I could go on into more detail, but I think the point has been made that this is a pretty significant military presence in the area. So you've already said the U.S. needs allies in order to be successful there, that they need to be prepared to stay a while. What do you think the opportunities are here, Renee, for success when it comes to really attacking these drug lines and the cartels who, as you've said, are not only flush with money, but they're incredibly savvy when it comes to using technology and adapting very quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. They adapt a lot quicker than we do, or any government can. So that is is an issue. Um, I think part of the issue is we don't know, and there's been a lot of ambiguity about why there's this deployment, other than to counter the drug cartels. How they're going to do that is very, very questionable. And I think all the experts are saying we don't know how they would do that. I mean, we can continue to pick off these drug cartel the movements like we did, but again, even that we don't know any details about who those folks were. Was it just one ship that was going out? Was it a main ship? Was there somebody on there? We have no details. And I think the ambiguity, this administration likes the ambiguity, but in this case, I'm not sure that that's helping them. I believe that they need to be clearer about exactly what they want to do, because they're not scaring the drug cartels. If it's really the drug cartels, they're not scaring the drug cartels. As I said, they'll just go underground, they'll use other routes. If it's to cause some consternation in the region, if it's the Maduro issue, then okay. But the problem with that is, again, how long are we going to be there? Eventually, if we don't put boots on the ground, which would be very difficult to do in Venezuela in order to get rid of a Maduro, if we don't do that and we pull out, well, Maduro will just say, "See, I scared them. They went home." So I do think we need to be clear about why we've got the military there. And then we also need to bring in the other arms of the government. If in fact it is the drug cartels, we need to beef up the presence of DEA, FBI in these other countries, not Venezuela, in the countries where it's really a problem, in a Colombia, in Central America. And we need to bring in and make this a priority for Treasury. I saw that there were some increased sanctions, but this really has to be, no kidding, a priority for Treasury. And then you still need the other side of what do you do to make up for the economics of the drugs for the people in the region. And I know that's not something that this administration is very focused on. But if you're going to have a lasting effect, you need to be able to support the folks in the region with, okay, what's another way that we're going to make money
There
and
are
feed our
so
people?
Right. So many missing pieces of this puzzle when it comes to what the administration is truly trying to put together here. But that was a big, important part of Plan Colombia, wasn't it? To also provide military and economic support to the
Correct.
government to enable them to take on more of these duties on their own, right?
Correct. And that was part of what we were doing at Southern Command. We were teaching them how to be able to do this on their own, which is why we eventually were able to pull out.
I want to ask you, you've already kind of mentioned that nobody really has all the answers or all the puzzle pieces yet, but which actors do you think, Renee, are most likely to really be pressured by this deployment? It doesn't sound like you think the drug cartels are going to flinch very much given their strong position financially, using technology and the ability to sort of evade. Is it them that the cartels that's going to come under more pressure? Is it transnational crime groups? Is it other state actors? Venezuela, China, and Russia have already signaled they're not happy about what's going on. Who kind of stands to lose the most?
So so while you have the big drug cartels, there's also a lot of people who support those drug cartels, just regular citizens. Um, you can call them criminals that aren't part of the drug cartels. They're probably going to feel pressured.
Mhm.
So in that sense, you'll get those folks. Other than that, I don't see, until we see what else the administration's going to do. I don't see who's going to feel pressured.
The show of force alone isn't enough to do anything, to do much.
No,
Yeah.
no, and in fact, we see them using that show of force to going to the international community and saying, "Here go the gringos again." The folks in the region they remember all the interventions we've had and the times that we have acted unilaterally, and that's what they're bringing up again.
I'm wondering how you think this deployment, if we're looking for opportunities, right, for silver linings, because a lot of us are really just spitballing right now, trying to figure it out. But how would you think that this deployment might add to the intelligence capabilities that are already directed to the region? I mean, is there a chance here for special operations forces assets, maritime surveillance aircraft to really fill in some gaps?
Absolutely, it's well known that this part of the world is always at the bottom of the intel priority list. So having any extra national security assets there is very helpful. So we will get more data, more information. My only concern about that is a lot of the folks who spent years studying the drug cartels and studying that region have moved on. They've either retired or they've moved on to other assignments because it wasn't a priority, and there were very few people until the last year working this issue. So having those experts being able to focus in and work the data is a concern. If I were working this now in the intelligence community, I'd be reaching out to academia, to the think tanks, to those folks who haven't given up and have been working this all along, and asking them for advice.
Really, because just as you mentioned, I think for some folks, they're like, we don't want to know what academia has to say. We don't want to know, but what you're getting at is the core expertise. They study these issues repeatedly, and they don't give up on them, developing sort of really an incredible knowledge of the area, the players, sort of the tactics that are being used. And so you're saying there should be a huge emphasis on that, bringing in
Absolutely,
that kind of expertise. Yeah.
absolutely.
What do you think the signal is to the regional partners right now when it comes to this sort of unilateral deployment? Because you mentioned that allies are going to be really important for anything long term to have much of an impact. Where can they likely be integrated, do you think? And is this something that they would welcome, would you expect?
Well, it's mixed. It depends. And right now, the region is very mixed in terms of the types of governments that are in there. I've seen Trinidad and Tobago, the government there coming out saying, this is absolutely what we need. This is great. And then I've seen, sadly, Colombia come out and say, this is not what we need. And I say sadly because of all the money and resources that we spent there. Um, but in their sense, I understand if there's any instability in Venezuela, it will directly affect Colombia because of the border. So it's going to be mixed. What we really need to do is have those experts help the administration understand who's on our side and bring all those folks together, and then slowly work on the other folks who maybe have more questions.
Yeah, I think influence matters. We just saw that in Shanghai over the past week or so. China, speaking of Shanghai, China has really been particularly vocal in opposition to this deployment. What does that suggest to you about Beijing's broader either ambitions in the region or what they're already doing there?
Yeah, so we've known for the last 10 or 15 years that China's been trying to get a foothold on the region. I would argue they have now, in some cases, have or not more influence than us, but a great deal of influence that should be concerning to us. I mean, they've built the ports, they are building roads, they are putting in telecommunications, they're buying up the minerals. So their concern is, if in fact the region were to decide, if the governments were to start more being more um, moving more towards us and being
Yeah,
working with us on this, they would lose that hard fought influence.
moving closer
That
to the West. Yeah.
absolutely. So I believe that that's the reason why they're so concerned and why they've come. Certainly, it's not about democracy or sovereignty or anything like that. It's them losing the influence that they've built and being able to gain more.
So I think this raises so many fascinating questions about just where we are sort of strategically in the world right now. But given that the administration is showing its willingness to invest, at least from a military perspective at the moment, into the region, and China's response, and given that you mentioned earlier, for so many years this part of the world has really not been at the top of the priority list for the intelligence community. Do you see that slowly shifting, or do you all of a sudden see this deployment, this very sudden deployment without a lot of information given as to why or what the purpose is or how long or any of that? Do you see that as something that might just be trying to shake up and get some kind of response? How do you see the whole big picture?
I don't think we know yet.
Yeah.
And there's not enough information because, and I've been talking to folks, been reading everything. There's not enough information for us to know if, in fact, this is a shift, a longer term shift, or if this is just something to gain attention, sort of try to scare the cartels and some of the governments there to do something. I don't think we know yet. I
Yeah.
think we're gonna have to wait and see.
And it could, who knows, it could just be simply projecting US strength because they can, at a time when it seems like alliances in other parts of the world are really disturbing. And as you mentioned, China's got a pretty strong foothold in every continent in the world right now through
Correct.
their Belt and Road Initiative, and really investing, as you described, in these regions, not only giving people roads and infrastructure, making their day-to-day lives better, giving them jobs, but also really aggressively using information in ways that persuade entire communities to think that that is a better lifestyle than what moving closer to the West might be able to bring you. What are you most concerned about when you just think about, I mean, even if you take away this latest military deployment and kind of the secrecy around it, when you think about the region and the impact of what happens there, why do you think the rest of the world needs to care, needs to pay attention? Like, what is that one factor of why strategically, if the US doesn't pay attention to what's going on there, it could have a serious negative impact on future US national security?
Yeah, I'm not sure the rest of the world needs to pay attention to it as much as we need to pay attention to it for exactly the reason you said, our national security. Um, I mean, it is the way that our adversaries can get into the United States in terms of all the logistics roads going to the United States. And the other reason why, for the United States, why it's important and for the bigger national security is the minerals that are there, the economy. We should be able to have a great relationship going back and forth, working with the folks from Latin America and having joint ventures, etc. That should be a no-brainer, and that would make this hemisphere uh, a lot more peaceful and prosperous across the board. And if we paid more attention, we'd be able to do that.
It seems like it's also difficult, and we've talked about this a lot at the Cipher Brief with many of our experts on just the way that democracy works in this country. Every 4 years, there's an opportunity for a brand new administration, and that means throwing out the old and bringing in the new. In the meantime, you're up against an adversary in China that does not face that problem, that has a lot more control over its society, a lot less freedom, and they're able to exploit that. I'm just wondering, overall, what might some of the indicators be that China is really having more of an advantage in this region than the US would like?
So I think what we saw originally, and that's what we would continue to see, is on the economic side. So as we continue to see them making economic inroads in the region, buying up lands, and the government's allowing them to do it. Again, probably last 6 or so years, a lot less focus on the region. When I was at Southcom, we would point out to the governments in the region, you understand that China is buying up all this land around this important mine. And then they'd go back and they'd look at it and they'd put in barriers for them to do that. I've not seen that going on in the last, as I said, 6 to 8 years. So that's what we, in terms of the kinds of things we see, that's what we'd see. I don't see them, and continuing to buy up all the logistics routes. And by logistics, I also mean telecommunications, or put in logistics routes, because then they have a backdoor to it. I don't see them. On the military side, people have talked about, oh, they've been talking about military bases over there. I don't see that as an issue. I don't think that will happen. Most of the countries actually have in their constitution they can't have foreign military bases. So it's not going to be the military side, it's going to be the economic side. And then you'll start seeing them side. I mean, you see BRICS with Brazil. So then you'll start seeing them do the international consortiums.
Yep. What I hate after this incredible conversation we've had to ask you this question, but I'm dying to know, what is the one thing that's kind of keeping you awake at night now, Renee? I mean, is it what's happening in this region? Is it something else? Given your title and what you oversaw when you were a DoD, you have a different way of looking at the world than the rest of us. So, what are the things that you're most concerned about right now?
I would say there's a lot. You ask my family and friends, they will tell you. Whenever they want to travel someplace, I'm like, no, don't. but but my main concern is what might be in our supply chain
Interesting.
and what adversaries could do to what we're so used to in terms of water, energy, etc. So that's my cyber, us being able to talk like this, the ability that countries might have to stop that. That's my main concern.
So it really wouldn't be difficult. We learned this from COVID to cripple supply chains given how they're set up today. And your fear is that someone may sort of, I guess this could be classified in a gray zone activity, right? Where there's deniability, but you're causing chaos and you're achieving your goals, but you're not going to go to war because no one knows it's you. So if an adversary were to come in and disrupt a supply chain and cause chaos, it wouldn't really be that hard, would it?
Unfortunately, no. And that should be the focus of the government, trying to shore that up and make sure our supply chains and our infrastructure is clean and defendable.